Hello, everyone, and welcome to Grading Optimization with Civil 3D. My name is Juliana, and I work in marketing here at MicroCAD. And today's presenter is Tim Corey, our applications engineer. By the end of the webinar, you will learn how Grading Optimizer for Civil 3D takes your design intent and produces a balanced side with your building paths, drainage, ponds, etc., which is definitely worth 30 minutes of your time. Throughout the webinar, you can ask a question at any given point on the left-hand corner. You can ask Tim to revisit a step or ask any questions. This is your time, and we want you to make the most of it. And in the upper left-hand corner, you will find links to our social media and website. Also, be sure to check in our YouTube channel. We post all of our webinars there at the end, so you can share with colleagues or rewatch it on your own time. And without further ado, we'll pass it on to Tim.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for attending. Oops, I did the wrong button. I'm going to share my screen with you so that I can show you some things about the grading optimizer. So a lot of people will ask, what really is the grading optimizer? Well, what this is this is an artificial intelligence-based program that lets you put in your grading intent, including objects like you see on my screen. I have a couple of building pads. I have, this is my grading limit here in red. I have drainage lines I've put in. I can have low points and high points and other types of objects, etc. So I place all these grading objects and I give them constraints. So for example, on a building pad, I can tell it, let me add a building pad to that real quick. And you'll see the properties here now of the building pad. So I could give it, yes, I want to be able to specify an elevation, and I can either give it a fixed elevation. You know, the center of this is at about 2186. So I could go in here, I could say, well, fixed elevation 2186. Or if I turn that off, I can give it a minimum and maximum, and then it'll iterate the elevation of that building pad while it tries to calculate earthwork quantities and you know, match my parameters. Okay. Now, the way you run the program and get to the particular tools is you go here to the Analyze tab of the ribbon in Civil 3D, and then way over here on the right side, you'll find Grading Optimization. Okay, there's the Grading Objects Browser, Grading Objects Tools, and Optimize. This Grading Objects opens or closes both of these two. So I don't really use that much, but you can, and that'll turn them on or off. Okay. Now, the three major parts of this, and where people don't quite understand, is there is a separate interface called the optimizer that runs outside of Civil 3D, but most of what you do with the grading optimization is created inside Civil 3D. Okay, so on this grading objects tool palettes, that's this button here. Okay, here's the tool palettes. These are all the various These are all the various grading objects that I can add. So you start off and you sketch your design just with 2D polylines. You don't need to calculate elevations or slopes or anything like that at this point. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and tell it, well, I have a building pad, this object, and this object. Okay. And I want to give them elevations. And what did we say? 2186. Over here, 2174. Okay. So let's say we want to do minimum 2170 and a maximum, whoops, got to be 2190 to 2170. Okay, so I can set those as constraints with this building pad. And then I just hit escape. There is no check mark to press or OK or accept or anything like that. You just close the building properties and that's there. So now anytime I select that polyline to which those constraints have been added, it'll bring up the building pad properties. Okay. Now, as I add more grading objects, in here, the grading objects browser will show me then every grading object that has been added to this project. Notice I have 2 building pads. I can pick one, I can pick the other, or I can hold control and pick both. And these are the properties. Okay, so if I want to just set the properties for one at a time, I could just pick one, etc. Okay, now I want to add a drainage line. So here's drain line. So let's go over here into my tool palettes, pick a drain line, and I'll pick, say I drew this, that polyline, and that polyline. Now when you draw these, you don't have to pick elevations, but you do want to draw it in the direction of flow. So start at a high point and go towards a low point. Okay, so those now have been added as drain lines. You can see, you know, do I want to use it as a break line within the finished surface? What color do I want to use? Okay. I also want to set my grading limits, this item, and this allows me to then set the entire site cross slope, minimum and maximum drain slopes for that. Okay. So all that looks good. So that's been set, and then you'll see I have a drain line, a grading limit, listed in here. Once I've placed all these grading tools and set their properties as I want them, then it's time to optimize. Now I'm going to show you guys a little trick that if you're using this a lot, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this grading optimization ribbon panel and drag it out so it always remains on my screen. So that way if I happen to be off in some other, oh wait, I did that wrong, sorry. Analyze. Okay. So now even if I go to other tabs within the ribbon, I still have my grading optimization toolbar here. Okay, normally that is on Analyze, but notice it's gone now because I have it floating. Now, when you're done, if you want to put that back, you point here and you see this top button, that's Return Panels to Ribbon. Okay, and you can do that. That's a little trick that you can do with really any ribbon panel that you have out there. Maybe you use layers a whole lot, where you could drag that out if you wanted. Okay, I'll put that back. Okay, so set it all up in here with all your properties, and then go to Optimize. Okay, now it tells me to select the EG surface. That's this guy. And I hit enter. Now it's going to start up the grading optimizer. Now this can take a minute or so. Okay, so you can see my different grading objects I've added, the 2 building pads, the grading limit, the drainage, etc. Okay. Now, if I want to adjust the properties of any of those, notice the same objects are listed here. My 2 building pads. So if I wanted to edit this one, I pick it over here on the list of objects, and then over here are the properties for that. Okay, and I could set the minimum, maximum elevations, etc. Now, before you optimize, what you want to do is come here along the bottom to optimization options. Okay, so the global constraints for the whole site, minimum, maximum drain slope. Okay, and then iterations. How many times does the optimizer go through this trying to enforce your grading parameters onto the new surface model it's creating? Okay. Now, a lot of the samples they show that'll say 100,000, etc. Those are deals where you're going to start it and you're going to run it overnight and maybe for the whole weekend or something, right? But you could do a small number just to have it give you a feel for where it's going with this before you run it with a big number. Okay, so I might start with something like 600. And then these are objective weights they have. So how hard is it trying to balance the cut or fill? How hard is it trying to minimize how much earthwork? So, not really the balance, but just how much dirt do I have to move around to find that balance? And then how much will it smooth the surface so my contours do not look too jagged? Okay, all that looks fine to me. I can simply close this, and then I tell it to optimize. Okay, it's going through some preset settings here. Now it's doing the optimization. Oops, if I pick the right button. Okay, it's showing me that we have maximum slope violation, some minimum slope violations. Okay. Let me set that, let it run a little bit longer. Let's go to 1200. Don't need that, and optimize. Now, what's going to happen is after it optimizes, it's building a surface model and it's building feature line. So for every drain line I showed it, for every building pad I gave it, grading limit. Okay, when I send the optimized result, which is what I'm going to do now, it's going to send those feature lines back to Civil 3D. So I can do detailed design using those. Okay, all right, so what am I going to do? This surface coming in, right? Built that design surface. What am I going to call that? Call that GO1, GO for grading optimization. What style do I want to apply to it? This is standard Civil 3D stuff here. Proposed contours, that works. Okay, then, so that's the surface information, but then there's also feature lines. You can see here, what's the style? Okay, what am I doing with those? I want to update an existing site, or I just want to put them in no site by saying just save to feature lines. But we're going to save to site. I'm going to create a new site, and I'll call this GO-1. And I say finish. And then it brings all those items into Civil 3D. So now I have a finished ground surface. There's GO1. Give you some idea what it's doing there. There's the 3D surface, okay? Notice the flat building pads, well defined. The break lines, or excuse me, the feature lines. So if I pick one of those, there's a couple of them there. It's going to be feature line here, feature line here. Now notice the feature lines are directly overlaying the polylines that you used, that you told it were grading objects, right? So the building pad is a polyline, etc. So now this example I just showed, this is doing this grading optimization on like a single building pad site, right? So a little bit smaller. This is not necessarily a whole lot faster than just using the Civil 3D grading tools, which will balance and do all that sort of stuff for you. But what if you get many different building pads to do in like a subdivision? So I've got a drawing I called MultiParcel. Okay, so here I've gone along and drawn polylines that represent building pads. Okay, I'm also going to show you that you can use Civil 3D parcels as building pads if you want. Okay, you don't actually have to put a building on them. You can just grade that parcel to within a certain range of elevation. Okay, so let's go ahead and say building pad. Select objects, that one. Oops, keep going. So here I'm just picking those polylines that I manually drew in. Okay, but then over here on the outside, on the other side of the street, I want to use a couple of these parcels. All I have to pick is the parcel labels, and it'll consider those building pads. Okay. So let's go look at our object browser. And you can see all these building pads have now been added. I could pick any one of those. You can see it highlights it. I could set properties for that. Maybe I want to set some specific property there, etc. I can do that for each parcel separately or all parcels at once. Where's my shift button? Right there. Okay. So I could set those values for everything. Like I don't want any material depth on any of those. So I say 0. Okay. Now I've also added in here, you'll see that I have a corridor. This object, which I've defined around this loop, using an alignment and profile over here. There's my finished ground profile around that loop. Okay, so I made the corridor, and then I extracted feature lines from the corridor. I don't know if you're familiar with how to do that. You pick a corridor, and then you go to here, Launchpad, and I extracted polylines from the corridor. That makes 3D polylines. And then I join those up so that I have an enclosed polyline. Okay. Along there. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to define that as an exclusion zone. So as the iterator or the optimizer goes through and tries to build this finished ground surface, it won't cross into the street. Okay, so we're using the corridor as the base of this design. So here's exclusion zone. Pick that. Okay, I don't care about the color, that's fine. So we've added the properties to that exclusion zone. So now it won't add any grading inside there. Okay, I also have added some drain lines between, like next to the parcel properties. So I could go along and go drain line, and just go pick those. That's a drain line. Drain line. Now notice one of the questions I get after I define these, so it's going to ask me if I want to use those as break lines in the finished ground surface. Okay, so if I look at the properties of the drain line, see here it says break line. I'm going to leave that on, that way the surface will consider this a break line. Okay, so I have 17 building pads, 1 exclusion zone, 12 drain lines. All right. So I'm ready to go ahead and optimize this multiple site or multiple parcel site. Lots of building pads, etc. So I'll go here to optimize. Okay, you can see the area it's trying to do. You can see the exclusion zone is not being affected. There we go. Pan. All right, I can look through my objects if there's anything I need to adjust. You know, this building pad, if I wanted to adjust it, I could do that. Here's its properties, right? Okay, so all that looks good. We're ready to have it do its optimization. So I just go down here to run optimize. Okay, it goes through some settings down here. You can see it going along. Once it gets here, then it's going to be actually optimized. Now, while this is happening, you can zoom in and out. You can play theme. Yeah, so there's my. Okay, here it's optimizing now. So if I don't want to see those violations, I can just uncheck those, and I just kind of get the light gray background. I want to see a set of contours. Okay. I guess this won't change it in the middle of optimization. And this will show you how many iterations it's done. See, I have it set up to go to 300. It's up to pushing 150 here in a minute. So what you're watching for is you want to see this line trending down. Okay, so as it gets further to the right, eventually it should just go straight right, meaning it's not optimizing anymore. It's optimized as much as it could. Now, generally, that's when you have the number of iterations up quite a bit. But here we're doing 1,000, I think, 300. Okay. Shouldn't be too much longer. We're almost up to 225. Now, you don't have to let it finish. If I'm watching this and I decide, you know what, that looks good enough, I think I'm going to be fine. I can go here and I can tell it to stop if I want. I'm going to let this one finish. But I can stop at any time. As soon as this is finished, then I'm going to send that optimized result back to Civil 3D. Okay, so it's done, and I can look at it underneath, top. Okay, so that looks pretty far out, right? Okay, so let's send that back to Civil 3D. Okay, in Civil 3D then, what do I do with the new surface that's coming in? Do I want to add to an existing surface, or do I want to create a new? I'm going to create new -1. And then I'm going to go look at feature lines. I'm going to create a new site, Geo-1. Okay, I can do reading on those feature lines if I want. Okay, I'm not going to worry about that. And I can say finish. Okay, so it has added that surface. I can look in here. There's Geo-1. I'm going to select that, look at it in 3D with the object viewer. You can see here the grading it did on those building pads. Okay. Now, so I have that finished ground or that design surface. If I want to calculate earthworks, then I could go here in my tool space, create a new surface, tell it it's a tin volume surface. Okay, and then I would compare OG or EG to OG or Geo Grading Optimizer. Okay. Now I have this surface 1. Notice the special icon. That is a tin volume surface. I look at its properties, and here I have volume. Okay. So out of 200,000 cubic meters of cut and 202,000 cubic meters of fill, it has been able to get that this close to a balance, 2,400 cubic meters of fill we need out of 400 cubic meters, 400, usually we'd say yards, but so there's about 400,000 cubic meters of earthwork, right? Dirt we're moving around, but our net is we need to bring in 2,400. Okay. And of course, you do your standard stuff like labeling and all that sort of stuff, just like with any surface. Okay, I want to show. Now, there are some questions coming in. I can look at this and go to first one is, who is the intended user for grading optimization? It's not really every civil 3D designer. It is anyone who's doing grading design, particularly on larger sites where you have lots and lots of grading objects and you have varying grading properties you need assigned. That's who grading optimization is for. Next question, is the software free with my Civil 3D subscription? No, it's not. The software is free with your AEC collection subscription. So when you subscribe to Civil 3D, you have the option of subscribing to AEC collection, which has like 20 some titles in it, and that includes grading optimization. So if you just get a vanilla Civil 3D, you don't have grading optimization. And then does the optimizer include a help system? Indeed, it does, and this is really cool. So if you want, when you want to learn this, you can go here on this pull-out toolbar thing I have, Help Center. I'll just move this out of the way. Okay, so lots of videos on how to use it. Move this screen back over here. Okay, it talks about zones, constraints, etc., zone limits. So there's, I mean, there are a ton.
Tim, we lost you. We can't hear you. And as a reminder for everyone, if you want to learn these topics in detail, you can always take a custom training with Tim or someone else on our team. We also offer group classes online. So be sure to be checking the MicroCAD website for future webinars. Thank you, Tim, so much for that wonderful presentation. That was great and very helpful. And that concluded our webinar today. Thank you everyone for attending. Bye-bye.